whom you muted. I don't see another one pop up that hadn't been. Um, so happy Saturday morning, and a few of you early Sunday night. Uh, we are here to do another one of our regular Saturday morning Zoom sessions, and um, I looked at my notes, and we started this April 4th of 2020. So a little over a year ago. We should have announced this last year. This is session 42, um, which is the answer to everything. And I was just figuring that means 52 weeks in a year, 42 sessions. We've missed 10. There must be 10 holidays a day, some that are personal holidays I decided we were going to take anyway. But welcome back. And I thought, well, one of the things I thought about was, who am I going to get to talk this week? I've got people lined up for coming weeks, but something I thought I would throw in this time. Actually, I have two presentations for today, and if the first one dies out with conversation, we'll go into the second one, and otherwise we'll just save that for another time. I was going to talk about showmanship, and we have had two sessions, two different presenters on showmanship already, and they're probably showier people than I am. I've had to work at becoming at doing things to make myself come across as a showman and presenting things. And they're little. I'm going to share a few tricks that I've done that have helped me make it more showy. Dave, I see the link worked.
Yes, it did.
Good.
Good to see you.
I think the other presentations have been more some of the theory of presenting and the reasons for it and what have you. And what I'm going to talk about here are just some tricks that each of you can apply that may help. Or Brian can apply and tone down his showmanship. Brian's not afraid to make a fool of himself in a professional way, something that my inhibitions have not really allowed. But I work at some of these to help. Anyway, as a start, newer callers, and I was stretch newer for many years in this respect, would deliver calls like head square through, right and left through, swing through. And if you just, trick number one, just add a spark to your voice. Head square through, right and left through, swing through. It just makes a difference if you do that. It just adds a little bit of what have you. One of the things that I like to think about is the way radio announcers on the news or MCs on disc jockeys rather, they have a little hype in their voice all the time. You know, today we're going to have great weather. And by the way, there was a car crash on the other side of town. Actually, I noticed a slight grin on Martin's face. I gave that conversation once at ECTA in Europe, and they said, well, here the news announcers just read the news and they don't make a big deal about it. So I guess that applies to wherever you are. But you definitely should deliver messages with the emotion of whatever the message is, but just give some hype to it. Now, one physical thing that works for me is if I just put a physical smile on my face. When I say hello to you, or when I say hello to you with a big smile on my face, you can hear that. I can feel the difference, and I'm pretty sure you can hear the difference. And to do that, because to me, smile, I have to remember that's with the ends up, because it's not a natural place for my face to fall. I've trained myself enough so that the second the needle hits the record, or now we can say the second the music starts, my face does go into a smile. And I think I've learned to do that here in these presentations too pretty well. At least some kind of a smile, not a big one, but what have you. And one of the things I've done to help me remember that is I used to have a picture of my son when he was a year old. He's 52 now. That just had such an infectious smile on it. You looked at it and you couldn't help but smile. And when I misplaced that, I finally just got a smiley face or such. But you just put a picture like that right on the table next to your amplifier. And every time you look down, it'll just remind you to smile. And it helps bring a spark across. I want to try something here. I would like to see all of you just say, I'm going to have you say heads square through, swing through, boys run. And then we're all going to put a big smile on our face and say it. Now, if you want to remain muted, fine. If you don't, that'd be even more fun. So what are we going to do? Heads square through, swing through, boys run. Ready, go. Heads square through, swing
through, boys run.
Boys run.
The timing was pretty bad on that. We didn't leave enough time to get square through. I didn't want to go square through and to go. It's four hands around. Anyway, let's try putting a physical smile on our faces. Ooh, this hurts. Now say it. Head square through. Swing through.
Swing through.
Boys
run.
Does it feel different inside?
And liberty and justice for all.
Thank you to the penguin. Flamingo, rather. Think about that. Now, Tony, I don't want to pick on you, but you're one of those rare people that I look up and you don't smile and you have a straight face. And when you're presenting, but most of the time I don't look up at you and you've got that spark in your voice anyway. You really know how to deliver that exciting sound, even though your face is fairly straight while you're doing it. As I say, I don't want to pick on you, but you're getting the point across anyway with the spark in your voice. And I'll give you a second to defend yourself, and I see you're doing it by staying muted. That's good.
I'm the only Tony here.
Yeah, you're the only.
Sure you make me.
Well, you're the only one I was noticing.
I was always the shy, skinny kid in the corner, and I spent a lot of time when I was a teenager. I spent a lot of time in my room listening to records with and without calls. And I'm also, as some of you know, a big fan of the Gilbert and Sullivan comic operas.
Yes.
So I would listen to the recordings of those too. So even in the days when I wasn't thinking so much about my facial expression or realizing that if I smile, it's going to sound better, I was learning how to imitate the people who did have a smile in their voice.
And it shows, because when dancing to you, there's really a spark there. And I'm reminded when I look up at you that, of course, Tony does mostly contras and traditional squares. And in that culture, there's more emphasis on the music, on the band than there is on the caller. So it's kind of a different thing, but it really comes across. There's a lot more than just prompting that you do, Tony, but there's enthusiasm and spark in your voice. But so anyway, that's one thing to try, is just physically smile. Remember to put a picture down, something that'll make you remember to smile, and physically do it, and it makes a difference. Another trick that I found was that when you give a call, each call is important. Make it sound important. don't apologize for calls. Let's say I want to do a spin chain through and I want to get them into parallel waves. Don't say heads square through. What the heck? We do that all the time. Do-si-do-do wave. Good. Now spin chain through. Make every call important. Heads square through. Don't apologize for it. Do-si-do-do wave. They've done it a million times, but make them think it's a special call. Now do your spin chain through. A real expert at this, he's since passed away, was Dick Ledger. Dick was a very interesting caller because he was very popular, and he was somewhat stuck halfway between the contra scene and the western scene, but he was really well liked because he was a super entertainer. And one of the things that people say Dick was great because he played the guitar when he did it. But he also, if you get a chance on YouTube, you can hear it. He makes every call sound important when he delivers them. Heads, pass the ocean, extend, recycle, make them think it's not only that last square through 3/4, there's an element left. Every call is important. If you emphasize every call, it makes a difference to your dancers. I heard a quote on the radio once, and this was some performer, I can't remember what, definitely not square dance related, but he said something that I've written down and used frequently. When you're on stage, it's better to be ridiculous than mediocre. Put that extra thing in there. People will, again, granted, you don't have to be ridiculous off stage, but on stage, it's something that, again, you'll be remembered for, assuming you don't do something stupid, ridiculous, but it's better to be ridiculous than mediocre. And that's a quote that I try to remember when I go on stage on occasion. I have a note here on how to be enthusiastic to build a singing call number, but I don't really want to get into that. Unless we really have people that are wondering. But I just a little background. I went to a dance once where Yikes Cameron and our New Hampshire caller had been calling, and he had the people climbing the walls at the end of that. And he said, "Oh, that was great. I got to do what he did and try and sell some singing calls." I've also heard Ken Bauer do things like that. And I tried this, and it didn't really work, and I added this and it didn't really work, and I tried this and it didn't really work, and I finally went to my mentor and say, how do you sell a singing call? Not that he was known for doing that, but he was known for being able to analyze things. And he said, try this, and I said I did, and add this, and I did, add this, and I did, and try this. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. And try this. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. And it worked. I was able to sell singing calls. And it took a lot of, it's better to be ridiculous than mediocre to get there, but it worked. Let's see. I guess, and I think I said it was going to be a fairly short presentation. It's gotten longer than I thought already, but there are a couple things I wanted to throw in. I want to warn about gimmicks and quirks. Some people, I guess it was Yikes Cameron again, mentioned to me once, if you're going to do a gimmick, plan to live with it the rest of your life. He said, when I was starting out, just to get attention, I used to wear a different hat every tip. And that, people knew me for that. And eventually I got popular enough, he was a really good caller, popular enough so I didn't have to do that. So I didn't. Years later, they're still asking me about my hats. If you want to use a gimmick like that, plan to live with it for the rest of your life. I think Cal Golden and his changing fancy suits was another example of that. Other quirks that people have that will set you aside, not in a good way, things to remember not to do. While you're calling, don't turn your back on the audience and look at the curtain behind you. unless you're doing a special gimmick showing that you can still handle choreography without watching them. Some dancers get a kick out of it. Let me actually jump to the last thing. My first wife and I used to do a lot of dancing here in New England, and we danced to different callers all the time. And we noticed that many, many callers had different quirks. And we would play Who Am I afterwards, just do some quirk that specific callers did that they probably weren't aware of, but other dancers probably were aware also, and kind of detracts from the calling, from the dancing, and from his actually good delivering of stuff. One was turning your back on the dancers. One of them I have written down as reading from the great cue card in the sky. We had some callers that would always be looking up above the dancers towards the ceiling as if they were reading something off of a big teleprompter up there, rather than looking at the dancers and connecting with them. Some callers would be busy up there instead of connecting with the floor, playing with their records, filing their records away while they were calling, or preparing records for the next tip. Or in the case of MP3s and computers, just playing around. And I haven't seen any playing solitaire while calling yet, but pay attention to your dancers. Give them your attention, because they'll notice if you don't. Don't look at your watch. Geez, I wonder how much time is left before I get to go home or before the refreshment break. Dancers are going to look up and see you doing that, and they're going to think, oh, he's bored. He wants to move on. He's hoping this is over soon. It comes through. We've had dancers that pace back and forth. It's a quirk that the dancers will notice and distract from them. Don't call with your hands in your pocket. I guess it would be one hand. The other would be holding the microphone. Some people concerned, and the last thing on my list here is some people are concerned about people tapping their foot. It's a distraction. I used to tap my foot, probably still do, to give myself a physical feel for the beat of the music. But some dancers were distracted by that, I found out, because I had dancers come up to the edge of the stage and sit on my foot, so I couldn't do it. Of course, I was pretty good at tapping with the other foot just to keep the music going. But all these little quirks are things that people notice. So if you're going to do something like that, try not to, but if you are, pick something that it's okay for people to go with. So in brief summary, just the little, as I said, not showmanship talk, but a few hints. Talk with a spark in your voice. To do that, have a smile on your face. Make every call seem important. Don't apologize for certain calls just because I know we've done the swing through boys run Ferris wheel a lot, but that'll get you there with the music. Call it as if this is the first time they did it and it's exciting. Emphasize each call. Don't apologize. And it's okay. It's better to be ridiculous than it is to be mediocre. And that's about all I've got, but I hope some of these hints may help. Any discussions, anything people want to throw in? My apologies, Tony, for picking on you. Go ahead, defend yourself now.
Did my file come through that I sent on the chat?
I see something on the chat, but I'm not very good at reading feelthemusic.jpg. I'm not very good at looking at the chat and looking at your smiling faces at the same time, so I go back and look at them later. But yeah, I do see a smile, something there, Mike.
I will occasionally get dressed up when I'm calling. Many years ago, I released a record on Full-Time Caller called Yellow Polka Dot Bikini. So I thought that would probably be a great idea to do as a bit of a novelty thing from time to time. So I had, because the shape of me is probably not the shape that you would normally be able to go and buy a bikini for. I had to have a bikini specially made for me. So I would put this bikini on before I went to the dance, and I'd get dressed over the top of it. And if I was doing a dance other than at my own club, I would try and get somebody, either the caller or somebody in the committee, to come and undress me while I was calling. So I'd start yellow polka dot bikini, and then they would come up sort of during the second figure and they'd start to undress me. So by the time the dance had finished, I was standing there with just my bikini on. So, you know, it usually brings on a smile to people's faces. And being an Australian, we also have timey kangaroo down sport. So the starting line on that is, there was an old Australian square dance caller, lying, dying. As he propped himself up onto one elbow, he said to his dancers that were gathered around, and then you start to call. So I would start calling lying down on the stage, dressed in a hillbilly outfit of some sort, maybe a hat or something like that. And I'd get somebody like Hanna to come along and start the music for me. And these sort of things bring a bit of a smile to the dancers' faces if you do that. And a couple of years ago, I think it was 2019, I was doing a dance, I think it was in Sweden, a national convention at Boras. And before I went to the dance in the morning, I put a pair of sort of shorts on that were an Australian flag. And I put these on underneath my clothes. And I was on stage calling with Tony Oxendine. And I said, Tony, I said, let's do this. I said, I'm going to take my pants off while I'm calling. I said, you want to take your pants off while you're calling? And he looked at me and said, no, not on your life. So anyhow, I then proceeded to take my pants off while I was calling, because not very many callers do that. And I had a pair of Australian, a flag with shorts, you know, and the dancers all thought it was, you know, hilarious having somebody on stage without their pants on and the guy standing beside them just looking bemused, wondering what was going on. I don't think Tony wants to work with me again.
We should buy him a pair of New Zealand shorts.
I have seen some of, if you look on YouTube, you'll find some Brian Hotchkies things and see how well he pulls off being ridiculous, but he's doing it intentionally and willing to keep doing that on occasion, and it works for him. It wouldn't work for me. Speaking of Tony Parks, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, two things. One, there's a great quote from Jay King in his book, The Fundamentals of Calling, about the every call being important. One big element of showmanship is confidence. And Jay King wrote that when a piano virtuoso plays a melody with one finger, you know he's a piano virtuoso just from the attack on that one finger. He says you should be able to do the same thing with circle left, circle right, swing and promenade.
I'll have to go back and read that. I assume that was the second edition of the book, Tony. He used to have two sections on choreography,
and then he put in the middle section on theory and philosophy and stuff.
And that middle section was excellent.
Yeah, I think that's where it is. And the other thing is talking about not looking at your watch. This is particularly important at one-nighters. I don't mean so much fun nights where the club is trying to attract new people as, where you are the hired entertainment for a school or a church or a country club for non-dancers. You are basically a DJ, and the last thing they want to see is somebody who can't wait until 11. So you know, the more you and square dancing are on display to the non-dancing public, the more imperative it becomes to be professional.
Have any of you ever been caught looking at your watch?
Your club dancers may forgive you for an occasional slip, but yeah, if you are the guest caller, it's a little more serious. And if you are calling to non-dancers, it's even more serious, even more essential that you don't blow it.
I have the clock on my computer and they don't know whether I'm looking at it or not.
Right. I've taken to, I used to put my watch flat on the case that my mic comes in, and now it's my phone, and I will surreptitiously press the side of the phone just to see what time it is, but I will make sure that nobody's looking there when I do it.
Yeah, that's, by the way, Tony, I think a lot of the Western group, and myself in particular, have been trying to not use the term one night stands, but because of the parallel connotations, but we use the word party nights these days.
Okay, well, I said one nighter rather than.
Yeah, I know, I got that.
And okay, party night. Yeah, Dudley often calls them onesies. And also, sometimes I'll say private parties or private gigs.
Yeah.
And Brian, we're still looking for a term that everybody will understand and then nobody will be offended by.
And Brian doesn't do onesies; he does bikinis, two-piece things.
He's got a bespoke dot bikini.
Indeed.
I won't go that far, Brian. Any other comments, suggestions, light bulbs that they want to share that lit up, or?
Somebody gave me a hint about appearance one time, and they said, take everything out of your pockets before you start.
Ed Foot used to say that. Take everything out of your front pockets, especially wallet, phone, keys, whatever. Get rid of those lumps.
I always do that, and I never thought to add that to the talk. The microphone I have, the old Electro Voice, had a nice metal box that it came in, and when I take the mic out, I'd put all the other junk in my pockets in there, and hope nobody would see me doing that and go up and rob it during the break. But I really wasn't that worried about that. Good point, Chris and Tony. Any other thoughts, ideas, comments?
On shtick or gimmicks, Charlene and I were rushing out of the house to go for a weekend square dance once, and I didn't notice that I grabbed two different sets of sneakers or mismatched sneakers. And I ended up there as dancing that weekend in the sneakers that I had, which were mismatched. And this has now become a shtick with me, that whenever I buy new shoes, I will buy two different colors of them and show up at dances with that. So the other thing, I recently ended up watching a quick YouTube video on the history of the band One Direction, which is a modern boy band. They formed, I guess, in 2010, based on their performances on a TV show called The X Factor. And this documentary went back to their initial performances on The X Factor, and they were absolutely awful singers. That's overstating it, but pitchy as hell. But they had something that completely engaged the audience and had the audience screaming, even though their musical performance was individually suboptimal. So it's just a reminder that whatever that thing is, that enthusiasm that brings it out in the audience is not necessarily singing ability or technical ability.
And I've mentioned many times there are many, many different parts to calling. And if callers can be successful by just having one or two of those that they excel in and being mediocre in the rest, and the rare special caller is one that has 3 or 4 or 5 of those they're good in, but there's nobody that really can handle all of them. pick the ones that are easiest for you to work on and get that. But work on them one at a time, as we've said with other things too. So remember, the thing to remember from here is smile and have a a hint to help remind you of that. Any other thoughts, comments?
I was just going to mention to Dan that I've done the same thing with shoes, but it's shoelaces with me. And you can be really different, like white sneakers with a red and a blue shoelace, or you can have, a little more subtle, have a brown and a black one, see if people notice.
Cool
It's
idea.
all in good fun. Yeah.
On the idea of the smile, if you smile, it has a tendency to close your upper palate and actually helps you sing better. And Ron Reagan had a tendency to always say "well," which allowed him to close his upper palate and also give him his open throat sound with a more meatier throat to it. So the smile is important for singing too.
Good.
Going back to the shoes, I can remember I was in New Zealand in Christchurch, and the guy that introduced square dancing to New Zealand, Art Shepherd, came on stage, and he had accidentally put on 2 shoes of different colors. He used to wear a purple suit, and he thought he had a pair of yellow shoes on, and he only had one yellow shoe on, and the other shoe was black. How he did it without noticing it, I don't know. But when it was pointed out to him, he very cleverly said, "Oh, yes," he said, "I have another pair at home exactly the same colors."
That came to mind when I heard that, but I didn't hear the Art Shepherd story. I'm sure he said it well before I thought of it.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing with pairs of socks. I got a pair just like it at home. Yeah.
I can't remember who that caller was that you were talking about, Don, that would look up at the ceiling, but I know that I've danced to that guy. And I think that the impression I always got as a dancer was that he was looking up there because he was trying to remember his memorized choreography. And
Well, that's
looking
why,
up at the ceiling was.
that's why we used to say, reading off that great cue card
Yeah.
was actually the one that I'm thinking of. I think may have stopped calling before you started, Chris. Was Joe Dombrowski and out of the Springfield area.
Oh yeah, that's definitely not who I'm thinking of. But there was
really,
somebody
really
during
good
my
caller.
era. Yeah, there was somebody during my era, and again, this person I'm thinking of was also a good caller. But yeah, they looked up at the ceiling like that. Yeah.
Yeah, Joe had some really good cue cards up there. Any other thoughts on this, or should I go on to my second presentation? We're being quiet.
Lars accidentally put on my badge at one point, and it took a long time before people noticed that his name was Hanna. But it was very funny.
I say much better. Don, I've got a good cue card story.
Go for it.
We had a caller around here you may or may not have heard of. His name was Bob Southern. He retired from calling back in the 90s. And he pretty much exclusively called Advanced and Challenge after a while. And he always used cards. And one time he dropped them on the floor and he went, "Oh, I dropped my brains."
I dropped some cards one time in the middle of a sequence, and then when I kept going, and scooped them up, and kept going. But the thing is, I was reading the second half of the sequence off of a different card, which I detected a few calls later, but it worked for a while.
Keith, on a parallel thing, back when I was learning mental image, I was talking back and forth, I think via probably snail mail at the time, with a caller in Texas. I don't believe he's around anymore, who was doing mental image. And he said, I'd be going fine for a while, and all of a sudden I'll have a mental breakdown. When he lost his mental image of what was going down, he referred to it as a mental breakdown. I thought that was as bad as dropping your brains on the floor.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I've learned today is that, you know, they give advice to people who may be a little afraid of or intimidated or nervous by a crowd, and you're up there. And so I guess this mostly applies to beginners. And they say, you know, try to imagine the audience as being naked. And I've learned an alternative today, which is if I get nervous, I can think to myself, well, I'm not really sure who the corners are, but at least I still have my pants on.
We'll have to call together sometime.
I'm going to need therapy after this session. That's all I know.
We can fix that situation.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, I just wanted to throw out there that, you know, I've been calling for a lot of years, and you still get nervous going up in front of a crowd, especially if it's a new crowd. You just learn how to deal with it.
Actually, you know, I'm going to make a serious comment about that. That just occurred to me. Something that that I didn't know. I didn't really understand this when I was a beginner. Is the degree to which your visible excitement and happiness affects the tone of the dance and the overall enjoyment. And so I don't think of myself as getting nervous because I've been doing it, you know, since they invented dirt or something. But
right.
The but there is a little bit of nervous excitement or something beforehand. And in fact, I try to have some. When it's right before it's time to go on, I try to get myself a little bit excited. It's showtime. Here we are. I think about it consciously. Let's, you know, I'd be enjoying it very much naturally, but I definitely try to psych myself up just a little bit right before it's time to go on, and I think that helps.
You're exactly right.
I've found that I've heard actors and performers non-square dance on the radio talking about that they're always a little nervous before going on stage, even though they're well seasoned. And I think it's probably an individual thing, because I found personally that I have to relax and just take it as it comes, and then put on my stage performer, remember to smile, persona, not performa, sorry. But I find that if I'm nervous, I really don't do as good a job, and yet a lot of people do. So I guess you've got to find your own style.
Yes, I was calling out of town when I first started calling, and I was using the 45s, and this was a very small community, so the lyrics would be put on a music stand. So I am partway through my singer, and somebody decides to put the fan on, and all my lyrics went all over the floor. Luckily, I had number of them. So I continued singing, and I'm trying to find it and scooping up the papers to put them back on the stand, and people still remember that.
One other little anecdote, and then I'll try to go on to the programming part. But as far as rolling with the punches of the occasion, the first weekend I got asked to call with another caller to come do his thing. I was warned that the dancers frequently come in the middle of the night and drag you out and want to do a middle of the night pajama tip or what have you. And I was warned so that I was wearing appropriate clothes, because I'm pretty modest. But they dragged me out, and I just played the totally sleepy person. And there was an old stand-up piano there, an upright piano, and I sort of climbed on top of that and lay down like I was trying to continue to sleep. And when it was my turn to call, I'd had a record queued up that was "Help Me Make It Through the Night," and that seemed to be appropriate. And people appreciated that part of it. Go ahead, Brian.
Just briefly going back to this business of taking your clothes off when you're on stage. Anything that you do like that has got to be done in good taste. You can't go doing anything that is going to offend people out on the floor. And dancers are, some dancers are easily offended. So anytime you do anything like that, you have to make sure that whatever you do is done in good taste.
Hanna, go ahead.
And I guess that it goes more for the gentlemen than the ladies taking the clothes off on the stage.
Maybe.
I was gonna say, we need more women in calling. Uh-oh, I'm in trouble now.
Oh!
That's the end of my career. Oh, well.
Somebody once asked me, the feminine of caller is call girl.
Keith, what do you got to add? Oh, Tony, were you still talking?
Off too, because Bill Peters did this Mad Hatter dance every year out here on the West Coast, and he kept on changing hats all throughout. He had about 100 of them, and he kept on, and that was funny. People look forward to it every year.
Bill was a really good caller, but he was a great performer, and he. By the way, did you ever hear him play harmonica? He was amazing at that. He had a whole case of different sizes, and
they do.
He kept saying, someday I'd like to record my own music on a record. But the other caller, if that was a great performer, and I think did vaudeville before that. If any New England people remember Franny Heinz, that was his specialty. Tony, did you have something else you were going to say, or did I misread you? Okay. I'm noticing a lull in conversations. We've dived into anecdotes and war stories, which are always fun. But let me go on to my second presentation about programming, at least one aspect of it. It's something that I learned from my mentor, Jim Mayo. I played around with it, adjusted it to my needs, but have found it really helpful and passed it on to others. And I'm going to read from my notes here. Roughly programming an organization of what to do, when and why, used to control the moods, understandings, entertainment value, optimum learning, health, etc. And there's lots of kinds of programming. I'm only going to focus on one here, but you should be programming for a regular club night. There's different programming for a new club you're calling for or calling for twice a year only. There's different programming for a party night, different programming for a class, for a workshop, for a festival or convention. Then you can be programming not only an individual night, but if you're doing a whole season with the same club, programming how you want the season to go. There's programming for every tip that you do. There's programming for every sequence you do. There's programming the singing call of where you build, where you drop. But the thing that I want to share with you guys is programming for a given dance, mostly in a new club or new, what am I trying to say? A once a year kind of thing. For a regular dance with a club or only call for once or twice a year, program each tip for the patter music and the singing calls, the choreographic difficulty, whether they're gimmicks or cutenesses. Is that a word, cutenesses? It is now. Each tip has a purpose. And here's some ideas of what I think each tip should do, and it has helped for me. So the first tip I think of as building confidence. These are dancers that have heard of you or haven't, that they know your reputation or they don't. And your main thing you want to do is convince them, is to prove to them that they can dance to you. Some people are timid, will I be able to keep up with this guy or what have you? So the first tip, convince them that they can dance to you. Use non-destructive testing. And I've written a paper on that, and I think some other people reprinted it several times about ways to test your floor. I mean, people used to say, keep getting the sequences harder and harder and harder until they break down, and then you can figure out how experienced the dancers are. Well, you don't want to break them down because that goes against proving they can dance to you, but there are ways to tell how good they are by how well they keep the formation that they're supposed to be in. Make them, that first tip, make them want to stay for the rest of the rest of the dance, because again, if they can't dance to you, or it's too hard, you're trying to impress them too much, you tire them out too much, they're going to think Yeah, I'm not sure I want to stay all night. Um, the singing call should be a peppy one, but not a real rouser. Get some spirit going. And the patter call music also get some spirit going, but don't try to send them up the wall. It's much too early for that. Tip number 2, you do some of the same stuff, or maybe a little bit more choreographic interest. Don't make it too hard, because this is probably the first tip for some people that came too late and you're still trying to prove to them that you can dance, that they can dance to you. Singing call should be something that rolls along, keeps them moving, but not a real rouser, not a laid back thing, but not a real rouser. By that time, on the third tip, everybody that's coming should be there. Turn over the page. They've been there for a while. They're all warmed up. They're ready to go. They're not tired yet. So tiring them out with a rouser doesn't hurt. Do a rouser. Make this the best tip that they have ever heard or ever danced. Let the choreography be interesting, but easy enough to get through. At least most of it. And the singing call should be a real rouser. Get rowdy. Again, I wrote here, it's better to be ridiculous than mediocre. Send them climbing the walls. Use what techniques you have to. First, the type of singing call you use, and then the way you present it. I had a traveling caller staying at our home once way back when, and he was a really good caller, and he had one number that did just this, and he saved it for the end of the evening. He built and built and built, and at the end of the evening, he did this. And I talked to him about this. Do you mind if I talk to you, even though I'm much less of a caller than you are? And he went to another dance and he did this. And the basic thing is, prove to them how good you are early in the evening, so that you can live on your laurels the rest of the evening. He didn't prove to them how great he was until the end of the evening. Some people might have wondered by that time. So, third tip, make it the greatest tip they've ever danced to. Fourth tip, whatever you do, don't try to beat the third tip. You've just made it the best tip. Don't try to do better than that. Let's see. Yeah, don't try to top it. Contrast it. Now's the time to use a gimmick. Now's the time to do a workshop tip. Try some very intricate choreography and play with that. You obviously don't want to try and beat the best tip you've ever done. That brings to mind a war story of it. You New Englanders may have remembered Tom Potts. Tom used to like to tell the story about at the New England Square Dance Convention once. He was standing in the wings because he was up next, and the guy on stage did an amazing job and had them climbing the walls, and it was really amazing. And as the guy walked off the stage and Tom walked on, he whispered to Tom, "Try and top that." Well, Tom was a smarter caller than that, and not only he didn't contrast it, he said, "Let's give so and so another hand. Wasn't that great? Let's bring him back for another tip." And Tom was quite willing to sacrifice his time just to put off this snotty guy that said it to him. But that's another story yet. So third tip, don't try to do better than your best tip you did the tip before. Contrast it with workshopping or gimmicks or some other thing. Fifth tip I usually think of similar to the second tip. Singing call, maybe an oldie, a sing-along. Keep it rolling along. Again, don't try to outdo yourself. It is okay to have another peak. I like to maybe around the sixth tip have another peak. Don't try as hard. Don't try and make the peak as hard as the first one, but have something exciting. Bring back some excitement. They're about ready to be excited again. don't try for quite as high a peak. One thing to do is 2 singing calls.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things about 2 singing calls is you can do 2 singing calls and make them good ones. One of the fun things programming a tip is if you do 2 singing calls, contrast them. I've seen both methods where I think Ken Bauer was the master of it, but you did a very nice layback thing, and then he'd put the needle on for the second singing call, and you'd start on the walls and work your way down. Just the contrast of you were all mellowed out, and all of a sudden he blasted you with the second one. And I've used that, and it works. And I've also used the reverse of that, do a fairly peppy singing call, and then contrast it with a real mellow one. And the combination is entertaining and is a peak in itself. Now, one of the things about your second peak, and I guess this depends on, I don't know, how long your breaks are, how long the round dance cuers go, whether you're calling a 2.5 hour dance or a 3 hour dance. And most of this I'm fitting in for a 3 hour dance with a 20-minute break. But don't do that second peak too close to the end of the evening. If it's too close to the end of the evening, people are going to be a little tired from it and may just say, yeah, let's go home a little early. And you don't want them to leave until the end of the dance. One of the ways I used to just judge the quality of my performance was what percentage of the dancers were there for the last tip. So don't do it too close to the evening. If my program here has got it set up for a 3 hour tip, 3 hour dance, a 2.5 hour dance, this might be too close to the end of the evening already. The last 2 tips, 7 and 8, I like to think of sending them home rested. Use a singing call that they know and they can sing along with, or humming in their own way. It's nice to have them go home singing a call, just having this song bugging them because it keeps going through their minds, but that'll help them remember it. It's nice to send them home relaxed. If you send on a regular group, if you have a regular group, or they come back once a month or something like that, if you send them home relaxed and the next week they're going to think, it's time to go back. I remember enjoying last time, I'm going to go back again. Or if you send a rouser too close to the end, they might think, I'm kind of, I remember going home exhausted and I'm kind of tired tonight. I don't feel like being exhausted again. So don't end with too much of a tip, too much of a rouser. Send them home quietly. The other thing is, if you're doing a guest tip traveling around and don't go to this club very often, and you don't really care if they come back next week or not, you just want them to remember you as being great. Maybe you want to save your rouser for the end and work it so nobody else. So what if they go home tired and don't come back next week? It's some other, their poor club caller that suffers. You want them to remember you as big. Again, it's a judgment thing as to where you are. But those are some basic thoughts on programming an evening. I'm curious if that makes any of you think differently, if some of you have other plans, any thoughts on it. Again, I'm not picking on Tony Parks, but I remember talking to you once, Tony, about, why do I like your calling better than I like other contra dance callers? I used to do more contra dancing and Western calling. And Tony said it's more than just how you call a dance, it's programming the evening about, and again, it's probably different for contras than you do here, but it's knowing when to pep them up and when not. So Tony has a lot of feel, as I recall, Tony, from programming was one of your secrets to making people like you a lot, which I did.
Well, one thing that I think that modern and traditional callers definitely have in common is that in terms of choreography, the hardest stuff goes in the middle. You don't want to send them home after half the set's breaking down, and you don't want to do your workshop tip or your challenging tip right at the beginning of the evening before you've built up their confidence. I had in my book on contra calling, I have one graph, the only graph in this book, and it's got two curves or two lines in it. One goes up and then back down, and that's the difficulty level of the evening. And then the excitement level builds, and you can do peaks and valleys, but overall, the excitement level goes up from the beginning when people are just trickling in up to the midpoint, and then you're going to lose a little. If you have a middle break in your evening, you're going to lose a little energy there. So you have to start hopefully from a higher level than at the beginning, but you're still going to lose some. So you're going to be gradually building it up again. And that's there's two schools of thought on the last tip. One is that it's your best rouser, and the other is that the next to the last should be your best rouser, and then you can let them down easy on the last one. I know Jay King was very, he said he was very biased against the relaxer tip in general, let alone as the last tip. He always wanted it to be either your best rouser or something they can go home singing.
Do you think that, I'm sorry, do you think that you might make different choices for that last singing call, depending upon whether or not it was the end of a night or maybe the end of a weekend festival? I mean, I think that one is pretty important. You really got to leave them. They're going to have to wait a whole year to come back to that gig. And, you want to make them really want to come back all year long.
There are lots of variables. One variable in a weekend is that on average, at least in my experience, the dancers at weekends tend to be more, better dancers, better able to recover, and more willing to be challenged than the dancers at any given single evening. So I can pull out things that I only use at multi-day events. But in general, I think the same principles hold, that the hardest stuff goes in the middle, and that you're always looking for ways to build up the excitement.
One of the things, Ed, I'll get to you after this quick comment. I did see your hand. One of the things I'm taking from this whole conversation is don't just call the singing call or the patter or whatever comes to mind to do there. Plan your evening. Be aware that each tip has a purpose. Think it through as to, do I want to leave them on a peak or let them calm down? Is it a weekend or just a single dance? Think ahead as to what mood you want to create with your program. There are different thoughts on different things. In general, it's interesting, Tony, that your programming for traditional dance sounds very similar, pretty good overlap with the one I talked about. Ed, what were your thoughts?
Well, I had a few things. One, as a newer caller, finding out how they run their particular dance. Are they going to have a dinner break or a meal break? Do they have the round dances? Do they have the line dances in between? And how do you structure around those? So those are just some things to think about, I would think.
One of the things that I haven't worked out is you're building a mood I build a mood with the road plan that I just laid out. It's, if you're working with a round dancer and they're totally unaware of this, they can break the mood between every tip. And I've never really worked with a round dancer where I've tried round dance cure, where we've tried to coordinate that kind of stuff. It can be, I sort of ignore that they're there, which is probably not the best thing, but it's a good conversation we probably should be having sometime. Bring some round dance cuers on. Brian, you seem to, you said you were going to bow out early. Have we kept your attention here? What's going on?
You have, yes. I was just sitting here trying to keep my eyes open, but I was enjoying the discussion. And a couple of comments that I thought I might make is
Please.
Another way of finishing an evening is to send people home with the last number that they can sing along with. Have them leave the hall singing the song, and that's another way. I mean, there's several ways of finishing an evening, leave them hanging from the chandeliers or let them down gently. But another way you can do it is to put on something that everybody knows the song, zippity doo dah, or something else that they can sing along with as they're leaving the hall. We've got a couple of songs over here that work very well in Australia that probably wouldn't work that well in other countries. But I've had people come up to me and say, please don't do that one as the last number. I can never get the thing out of my mind. I keep singing the thing all week, which is a good thing. I think that's a good sign. I've achieved what I set out to do. And another thing that I do for the very first tip, if I'm doing a weekend somewhere or a night for people that are not familiar with my style of calling, the very first number I usually call something that's just a little different, because I like calling stuff that is easy but different from what they're going to always get, and I will do things that will make the dancers go, hey, we got to listen to this guy, otherwise he's going to call something that we don't understand, and I'll call things like head men take both girls up to the middle and back, as a line of three, do a do-sa-do. So you got these lines of three doing a do-sa-do, and then lines of three pass through as a threesome, promenade around the outside, halfway back to home. Just silly little things that the dancers really can't make a mistake on, but it makes them think, wow, that's different. We haven't done that before. And another trick that I do sometimes is to have head men take both girls up to the middle and back, go forward again with your hands up high, make an arch with the opposite person, side two men through the middle, do a do-sa-do. So you got the side men doing a do-sa-do through the center of these arches. And then after you've done that a few times, you have side men take both girls up to the middle and back, go forward again with your hands up high, make an arch. And the two head men promenade around the outside, halfway. They've thought they're going to do the do-sa-do through the middle, but you have them promenade around the outside. And then when they get to the other side, have them tunnel through back to home again. And it's all really, really simple stuff, but fun things for the dancers to do that maybe they haven't done before.
Make it your dance, obviously.
Absolutely. Yes.
I have a war story that I was reminded of when Ed talked about find out if they have a dinner break, find out how they structure the evening. Beth and I, in I think it was 1989, did a 2-week tour of Denmark, and we found that everywhere from the city to the smallest town, they had a custom where, say, the dance goes from 8 to 11:30. At 9:30, they break for a solid half hour. Either there's a separate room with long tables already set up, or if there isn't one, then they'll quickly set up long tables in the dance area. And for a solid half hour, they would load up on alcohol, tobacco, sugar, and caffeine. Everybody brought food, including cakes, whatever. Of course, lots of coffee, and they would smoke and drink, and it was a whole new ball game at 10 o'clock. So we learned to save our easiest stuff for after the break.
But when you were rattling that off, I was thinking alcohol, tobacco, firearms. Oh, wait a minute.
Right.
Our club has a no open carry rule. Tony, I imagine you don't I don't know. Can you think of things that if you when Brian and I mentioned giving them something at the very end of the evening that they can go home singing, uh, your music doesn't tend to float with the songs that they can go singing too often, but it's
Well, you know, back when I had a house band, sometimes we would end with a contra and do we would have a what we called a coast to coast contra where we would do songs from all the different parts of the United States and end up with I think it was California Here I Come. So you know there's nothing that says you can't use singing call music for a contra.
Oh, yeah. I recently, very recently, on YouTube, I don't know who I was watching or what, but came up with somebody doing Trail of the Lonesome Pine, and it took me a long time to get that out of my mind.
Some callers have theme songs that they do always at the end, like Roy, like Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. Happy Trails to You. At the end of their show, for instance. But what? Any thoughts on that? I don't particularly like to, because I'm always expecting that, you know, and I might just want to leave early because of it.
I do that, and most of the time, I don't always do the. I don't always complete the singing call normally. Um, Sometimes I'll use it just to, you know, with a club that I call for every week or something. I'll start the song, and then I'll just use it to turn it into a big circle, you know, in a grand right and left around the entire floor and that kind of thing. And so, and they, you know, they like that. It's kind of a tradition. So, yeah, that's the thing you can do.
I've noticed that we've gotten to and slightly past our usual official 1 hour thing, and I want to go through the thank yous and then open it to conversation for a little bit more. Actually, start with an anecdote. But thanks, Dan, for providing the link for our gathering. Thanks to our presenter. Thanks to you guys, especially for coming. It's always wonderful to see. What have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 countries represented on almost as many continents. It's always fun to see. And we'll be around next week. Clark Baker is going to be doing something for us again. And with that, oh, and the usual thing is that if you feel you have to go because you've only got an hour designated for this particular Zoom part of your life, feel you don't have to make apologies. You're not going to offend anybody if you leave. But otherwise, let's stick around and talk like we usually do. And I want to start with an anecdote about the last tip of an evening. I was calling a dance up in Maine many years ago, and I was planning to use as the last tip, quiet, send them out the door with a turn out the lights, the party's over. And I got to talking to the custodian a little bit before that. And I said, if there's any way, you know, to dim the lights slowly during the last singing call, that would be kind of cool. And he said, sure, I can do that for you. Well, it turns out they didn't have dimmable lights. He didn't think about it, neither did I. They had these huge banks of fluorescent lights. And so during the last singing call, he'd turn off a light here and turn off a light there. And it was just, you know, kind of haphazard and didn't really add to the mood. But I ignored it. And in the talk afterwards, the people coming by and saying hello, the club president came up to me and said, I've really got to apologize. You know, you'd think with as much money as we pay the janitor to be here, that he could wait till after the dance is over to start turning the lights off. And I explained to him, no, he was trying to do what I asked.
At least you didn't turn them all off at once.
Yeah.
I had a janitor do that once.
Really?
I had built the evening. I programmed it carefully. I had a set of 2 squares and then a contra and the energy was going to build from the first square to the second. So the first square was moderate energy, the second square was high, and the contra was ultra high. And in the middle of the first square, he flicked the lights, and it was like curfew time. So ever since then, of course, that was years ago, and I always ask if I'm at a venue I don't know, I always ask, what time do you end, and is it a hard limit, or can we run over a few minutes? Because some of those janitors, they don't even bother with overtime. They just want to get out of there.
The custodians can make such difference. There was one club that I used to dance to regularly that the custodian was eventually given an honorary badge by the club because he was so helpful and so friendly.
Oh yeah.
Yet there are others that you need something and they'll go knock on his door during the middle of the dance, and it'll be, this troll under the bridge saying, "Who's that knocking on my door? Don't bother me." It makes quite a, so it really is a good idea, Tony, to ask beforehand what you're going to deal with.
Some about gimmicks and traditions and any special things that you might do is that sometimes there will be people that don't like it and that might come sort of despite of it. Like we were talking about the thing with the traditional closing song that somebody might have a certain song that they close with all the time, and some people might hate that. And so, I mean, whenever you're thinking of kind of anything really, there's always a decision that you have, a little calculation you have to make about whether it's going to, in fact, go over well, or whether or not, people are going to hate that. I don't know. I'm really paranoid about that sort of thing myself. So I basically never tell jokes or anything like that. But there are a lot of people that do, and it works great. But you just have to, you just have to make that calculation.
Brian, were you going to say something? Did I read your body language right?
Yeah, I'm just going to go back to turning the lights out. I use that gimmick quite a lot. Well, not at my own club, but if I'm doing weekends or something like that, I'll often turn the lights out. But I turn it out before I start the last number. And I tell people that we're going to turn the lights out, and then I give them a few moments to readjust their eyes to the dark. And I'll say things like, with square dancing, we have different forms of square dancing. We've got Texas style square dancing, and we've also got Californian style square dancing. And the two are very similar, but right now we're going to use another form of square dancing, and this is called dancing by braille. Because the lights are out, you're going to have to feel your way around the square. So just be careful with what you feel as you're doing this. And, the dancers sort of have a bit of a giggle about this, and you keep the choreography really, really simple, and don't use an up-tempo number. I usually use things like turn out the light, the party's over, or put a light in the window, or Goodnight, Sweetheart. Something like that, and keep the choreography really, really simple so the dancers are not going to get screwed up with everything in the set. And, you hear people screaming down on the floor as they're bumping into each other and this sort of thing, and it usually goes over really well.
I do the thing where the turning out the lights sometimes too, but never at my own dance.
No. I mean, I have at my own dance, but usually I
just go to other people's dances and turn the lights out randomly when they're...
You've got to make sure too, if you're going to turn the lights out, I've had a couple of situations where the lights that they have in the hall are the sort that will not come back on again for 20 minutes. They have to cool down before they can come back on again. And you don't want that. Like, you want lights that will come straight back on again at the end of the bracket or tip. Yeah.
Chris, when you were talking about ending an evening with a grand right and left around a big circle, I will occasionally use that at a party night if they're all good friends. But the time that I fairly regularly used to use that is when I'd call New Year's Eve dances. And I would time it that at the stroke of New Year's Eve, I'd have everybody do a grand right and left and say Happy New Year to everybody as they went around.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Hannah, you must have some stories to tell. I'm sure you entertain people in your own way.
Loads.
You always
Loads.
entertain me. No, did you say loads or no?
No, she has loads of stories, Don. She's a wonderful lady.
I know that part.
No, a very funny thing we did lately before the lockdown happened with a caller friend of mine from Sweden. His name is Leif Ekblad, and he's a funny guy on stage. So he heard that I have learned how to yodel. So he called me and he said, let's do a yodeling song. And I thought to myself, well, Leif yodeling, never heard him do that before, but I said, okay. And this was the first time that I couldn't stop laughing on stage because his yodeling was not yodeling, if you catch my thought. It was terrible noises coming out of him, but the dancers just loved it. It's somewhere on Facebook. Lars put it in. Yeah.
Post it in the chat. Post it in the chat.
Yeah, we can try to do that.
Yeah, we'll try to find it.
Yeah. It was really funny. But yes, and another thing, if somebody says to you, Brian, that please don't do that because I can't get that tune out of my head. Nasser Shuker, he wrote a very funny thing about that. He said, if you have something, like you have this song in your head, you cannot get rid of it, then call somebody you don't care so much about and sing it to them.
Sounds like Nasser.
They just hang up.
Yes.
One of the things I noticed today during this actually the first part too, is we had Tony Parks on our Saturday session several times, but the first time was explaining about the parallel world of contra dance and traditional squares to our Western dance, and that a lot of people are unaware that the other exists, but they're very, very closely related. And I've learned today that there's more than just the origins and some of the calls related, but a lot of the programming techniques and all this other stuff it's really a parallel universe.
Well, yeah, I mean, Don, you should know because you came to my contra dance so much. You know that the stereotype of the people drinking from the jug and the kick them in the shins and knock them down is a total stereotype, and there are lots and lots of traditional dances that aren't like that. That we're a lot more nuanced and a lot more multi-level, multifaceted than a lot of people realize.
When you talked about your house band, I have good memories of that group getting together regularly and listening to them. Some
one big difference between the two networks is that that we use live music almost exclusively. When I do party nights, about half of my paid gigs are with recordings. But when it comes to open public traditional dances, contras, and traditional squares, people won't come unless they see the name of a band or the name of musicians in the publicity.
And the first time I had to work with live band, the first 5 times, I kind of freaked out because you don't have the volume control. You can't pick up the needle. You're not in total control. Even though you are when you learn how to talk to them.
They don't always do what you want them to.
Well, I've always found they do what I want them to. I just have to learn the language to talk to them. It's a total new method of communications also.
I would like to see, maybe as a future program, how to work with live bands. Like if you want to pick the needle up, for instance, how do you tell a live band to either quit or soften way up so you can talk and give instructions, whatever. Just different things about working with live bands. Doesn't have to be hashed out now, but I was thinking another program.
Yeah, that would be a good session. I mean, the short answer is you develop a set of hand signals, but yeah, that would be fun to talk about that.
Definitely a good idea, Mike. And my mind's sort of running that there are two versions. One is asking Tony to do it for working with contradance bands and traditional squares versus when you get the opportunity with a Western, a regular Western caller and bringing in something too. It's sort of a lot of parallel, but not completely. Maybe we can even get two different presentations on that.
Well, I have done some, I'll call them one-night stands, party dances with live bands, like reenactments and things like that. But everything worked out okay. But
when I hold forth on this subject, I usually try to get a musician to sit in and give their take on what they would like from the caller.
Yeah.
Oh, that. But you're talking, Tony, about bands that regularly call for dancers.
I'm talking about when I do a caller's school or a caller's workshop at a festival. If one of the topics is working, for the callers is working with live music, I like, rather than just talk about it myself from the caller's point of view, I like to get a working dance musician in there and talk about how it feels from the other end, and tell the callers what he or she would like to have in the way of communication, in the way of they're not just a machine that cranks out tunes. You got to treat them like people.
Mike, I just have to throw in one of my favorite anecdotes here, but I know I've told Tony, maybe a few others, that locally here on the island, there's a big get together that in one of the huge barns, a Grange Hall, that a group does every year, and they usually have a contra caller and the local band, the Flying Elbows, do their stuff. And this year the band, or this year, the year I'm talking about, 4 or 5 years ago, the band double booked, and so they said, well, we can't do it, sorry, we screwed up. So the group went out and got a different band, which was a local steel drum band, and they went to the regular calling, so I can't work with them. I wouldn't know what to do. Call Don Beck, he's versatile. So I got together with the steel drum guy via email, and we practiced via email, just exchanging playlists for about half a week. I said, I do it in two parts, patter call and singing call, and the patter call, any 4/4 thing will do. I can keep up with it. And he said, what tempo? And I said, I don't know if I said 120 or 124. I just got to know the tempo. And then I went through my singing calls, and I found, Jamaica Farewell and a few other singing calls like that were on his playlist too. And we got together and we had a great time. We had, his band was on steel drum, but he also had a guitar and a keyboard, I think, and what have you. And, a whole pile of squares, having a good time. And it was an interesting night to be able to say I managed to call with a live band that I had never worked with in a music that wasn't typically overlapping mine, but it worked out well. But that's a great idea, is get some live band information going here. Any other anecdotes, any other questions, any other people that want to go away and go to sleep? Yeah, that's Brian. It was great seeing you here, Brian.
Well, Don, did you go over, did anybody mention any software that you could use to program dances with? When I got CSDS, I've worked every dance I've ever done with it, and used the programming part of it. And it's rudimentary, but it's very serviceable. It lets you put your music in, and it lets you put your choreography in, a lot of stuff, and it's it just lays. You can lay out a plan, and then you flesh it out with the choreography and that, and it works pretty good.
So Keith, how does that work as far as the programming an evening with it?
Well, okay, you would start maybe with the outside of it, where you would go and put the, first thing you enter is the name of the hall, the name of the group, the date, the time, all that other good stuff. Okay. And then the next thing you enter is what frames you want to put in of choreography. They're like your cards or collection of cards with each tip. And then you put in a song list. And I don't know how connected the song list is. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've used it. Oh, it's been a while since I've used anything. What's that? A microphone? So you kind of get to build a big framework, and then thank you. and then you get to flesh it out with your choreography and your songs. And then you store it all away, and when you want to do the dance, you pull it up, and you can find everything. It's
so the basic answer to your question was no. Nobody has talked about software that does that.
Okay.
I know, because I pretty much have ingrained this programming thing I have. When I was calling, didn't really program the evening out beforehand. Every tip I would get up and I'd pull out the records that this fits the need of what this next tip is going to be. And actually, my method of behavior was, at the end of the tip, I would pull out the records I'd use next tip. So when the break was over, I could go right up and start calling.
Yeah.
And so having played a little bit with Square View and Square Desk, I was a little concerned that you had to go up, and I guess in Square View you can queue up one card, one song, but then you got to fiddle around to find the next one to queue up. Yeah. So I have been playing around creating a software program. I'm not a programmer. I've been playing around only because for me it's been fun I've found an application that you can build your own applications without knowing too much programming language. And I've come up with something where you've got a list of your singing calls and a list of your patter calls, and then you've got the one that's queued up. So you can just click on either of these lists and queue up a patter and queue up a singer. And then when you're ready to go, you just say, play this one or play that one. So it's helping me with one tip at a time. Yeah. Someday when I finish cleaning up enough of bugs and putting in, it's going to be very basic, but I may end up making this available both for Windows, Mac, and Linux.
I have a feeling that when Vic started working with that, this was the part of it that he did probably the first, and then the music management and you can use different plugins for your player if you want, and the choreography tool came later. It's not as nice as Taminations because it doesn't animate anything, but what it will do is it will give you a blow-by-blow list of the figures that you go through each formation as you progress through a tip. You can look at that. So that's pretty useful information right there, and it does quite a bit of stuff. I've used the thing exclusively to do dances. And when I get especially into advanced and stuff, I would do a few cards, and of course, I do some extemporaneous calling with it every tip, but it tended to be a pretty good tool, and you could just put it right in front of your face. And you can actually read choreography off of it if you can see pretty well. It's got a pretty good size screen. I find a 15 inch is adequate.
So, Mike and I in Square Desk have been talking about what directions we want to go in choreography management. I would love it if you wanted to do a presentation on this is how I use CSDS. That'd be awesome.
Okay, yeah, I'll start thinking about that. The other thing, Dan, I'm glad you spoke up. I wanted to ask you, how well do you know? You're more North Bay than I am, because I'm down here in Monterey.
Right.
And how well do you know the members of the Ghost Riders as far as getting a musician on here?
I don't, because I dance mostly with the gay clubs. So I've been to a couple dances where the straight clubs are, but or where the straight clubs, and they're also kind of the south side of the bay, so they're midway between us.
I'm thinking the guy that would be best out of the Ghost Riders would be the piano player and keyboardist Brad Garrett, to come and present if we could get a hold of him. He's like a Facebook friend, and I've met him a couple of times and worked with him once. But he actually was a professor of music, and he's been in country and western bands and stuff like that. You can I kind of read this out of his history, and I think he provides. I never could. Basically, they kind of had like a rhythm guitarist in there. I forget his name, but he was the manager. Their guitarist Gary. I mean, he's amazing. At USA West a couple of years ago, they did in Reno. They did a concert on the Wednesday night before the dancing started. The guy can play Hendrix like you wouldn't believe. He did something like Little Wing, and I mean, it was like note for note. Beautiful solos. They're very versatile. All of them.
Sounds like a great idea. I have no contacts there. Keith, are you going to be
Facebook friend at least, so I could message him or something like that.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, but we'd have to plan some dates. Maybe I should just approach him and see if he'd be interested in doing a presentation to a bunch of new and continuing square dance callers on a Saturday morning concerning working with a live band. I think that's the topic, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if he's comfortable with that, wants to do that and wants more details, have him contact me or Dan. But yeah, I've got the schedule of who's coming when, so that might be good. Keith, sometime when it's not everybody bugging us talking here, I'd love to show you what I've started on this program, and you can tell me what features are missing that you want, if there's some basic ones that I've had a few people like Chris and Dan look at it, and they're real programmers, so they look at a different different way, but they've been helpful at seeing things too.
Well, I didn't write that kind of software, but I mean, I'm a real programmer too, but more like firmware.
Yeah,
but I've done some higher level stuff. I've had to control lab instruments and stuff.
Mine's lower level, but I've been able to do a reasonable amount with it, and just looking for thoughts and ideas and simple features. Dan, I've decided that I cannot change pitch. I've read forums that people just haven't been able to change that. So tempo, I'm getting better with. Pitch is not going to be changed, so it's not a feature we're going to have.
Yeah, Mike and I. There have been some licensing in the GUI. Licensing issues with the GUI toolkit we use. And so we've been talking about, well, it's the way everybody seems to be going is using web interfaces for everything. And we've been trying to figure out how to change pitch and tempo using just JavaScript. And I don't think it's going to happen.
Fortunately, live code has the tempo thing in it, and it has looping in it.
You need a DSP.
Well, it turns out people are doing tech demos with it, and JavaScript, if you treat JavaScript as a virtual environment, you can compile C code to JavaScript, and it's about 2.5 times less performant. So with modern CPUs, it's possible to get there, but it'd be a lot more coding and that kind of stuff than I really want to deal with.
Live code lets you compile to HTML, but I'm not. I'll worry about that later.
Your mark of a good program is lazy. That's
yes.
Wow, it's been an interesting session. We pulled another one out of the hat. Number 42, the answer to everything. It's been a year, Dan. How did we get into this? It was a year ago we learned about Zoom.
Yeah, I was foolish enough to subscribe to Zoom, and then it's all over.
Any other thoughts, comments, interests before I bow out? Keith, you want to talk sometime about looking at my thing?
Oh, about CSDS? I mean, I think
well, yeah, that I've got you down to contact about, but just looking at my crude program.
Oh yeah, you should get a hold of me. We can't do it on Wednesdays anymore. You're busy.
Do you have time after this? I'll send you a link.
Today. Yeah, I could do that for a minute. Yeah.
Okay. It shouldn't take more than 2 minutes. Oh, I'm saving chat again. I try to do that and then read them afterwards. There's some good stuff that I miss out on during the time.
Yeah. How's your calling school coming along, Don?
The mental image stuff?
Yes.
Group 3 is winding down pretty soon. I've sort of given them what I can, and we're just chatting. Groups 4 and 5 are on lesson 5 and doing well. Yeah, we're getting to some interesting part and some good participation, and it's been fun. And I'm thinking of possibly, if group 3 fades away, of starting a group for very, very experienced callers. I've got a few that have shown interest in that. So if you know anybody in that realm, let me know or let them know or something.
That way they don't have to know, nobody has to know that they're there, you know. Because they know everything, right? I mean,
well, they're not learning to call, they're learning just to add another tool to their rather full toolbox, that's all.
Sure. Absolutely. I was hoping I'd be using it by this time, but to me, the most daunting task ahead is to try to find and piece together somebody to call for around here. It may be the death of my calling, but you know, we look forward to the future with optimism.
Well, it was nice that Brian was saying that now that they're able to dance again, that the majority of people have come back. At least I think that's what he said. That's what I was listening for.
Somebody mentioned also from Australia that they got a lot of new people into the activity when they opened up, and I don't remember who said it, but they said like something 4 squares of new people.
Wow,
that's a lot.
My neighbors have a tape group in their driveway with masks for people who've been fully vaccinated, and the number of people walking by and expressing interest is really high. So yeah, I'm going to go, as it comes back that we can actually go back to dancing, social undistancing, full press marketing for new dancers is my direction.
Well, my driveway's like this, so it's not going to work.
You can work with high-level dancers and low-level dancers
at the same time. I could
in fact
a unique caller in that way.
The thing that I am doing immediately after this is pricing out the cost of a new at-grade deck in my backyard so that we can fit 2 squares back there. But that's going to cost a couple $1,000.
Yeah.
We should coin a new term, highway marketing, but I mean driveway marketing.
Well, it's like garage sales, yard sales, yeah. Yard sailing, square dancing.
We're selling you on new ideas here.
All right. Well, if that covers it for everybody, I'm going to go price out this new deck.
You don't want this thing to run 7 hours like last week? I guess with that, I'll bow out. And Keith, I will send you a link sort of like right away if I can figure out how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's no bigger. I can send you one. I've got several that I reuse that are anytime meetings.
I'm having email problems again. But so yeah, I'll send you one. I got your email address.
Well, this is Apple. A text message will work too. You know that. It's all tied together.
I'm not sure I've got I need your phone number for that. I don't know if I have it.
Okay, well, do whatever you need to do, and I need to go see a man about a horse. And thanks a lot, guys. Great meeting. Even though I was late, I really enjoyed it.
Well, you get to listen to the first part on Dan's video.
That's true.
We talked this second part. We talked about programming. The first part we talked about something else. What was it?
Showmanship.
Showmanship.
Tips on showmanship from somebody not known as a showman.
Resurrecting P.T. Barnum. Okay.
Bye. I'm leaving.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.